Hi everyone, welcome to this channel. Today, we're going to dive deep into something that's often puzzling but rarely explained in detail. Have you ever felt like you're being watched, even when you're alone? In this episode, we're going to uncover one of the creepiest stories you've never heard before. Black Hollow. A name that means nothing to most people, but in the remote western reaches of Herefordshire, England, it's whispered like a warning. Hidden between mist-choked hills and dense pine forests, the village seems to exist outside of time. There's no town square, no supermarket, not even consistent phone signal. Since its founding, Black Hollow has always been described the same way, quiet, but unnervingly so. A place where silence has depth, and shadows seem to remember. Every 20 years, something strange happens here. Someone vanishes. Sometimes a farmer. Sometimes a child. Once, even an entire family disappeared overnight. Locals call it the taking. And what's worse, these events seem preordained. A long-dead priest who once served the village wrote in a journal that still sits, dusty and untouched, in the local chapel's basement. In this place, time runs backwards, and shadows never leave their origin. Most dismissed him as senile. But there's something different about those who live too long in Black Hollow. Their eyes dull into mirrors, their speech slows, as if they're afraid the wrong words might wake something. And though the records never mention it, there's always been someone who sees it coming. Someone who knows before it happens. This time, that someone is Edric Moore. Edric Moore never invited chaos into his life. He lived alone in a modest flat in Worcester, working as a museum curator. A man of structure, routine, and silence, he preferred ancient texts over people, dusty archives over noise. For 35 years, nothing had ever truly disrupted the predictable rhythm of his days, until the letter arrived. The envelope was aged, with frayed edges and an embossed wax seal. It came from a solicitor, informing Edric that he had inherited a rural property in Black Hollow from a woman named Agatha Langford. The name tickled something in his memory. He vaguely recalled an older woman visiting the museum once, asking questions about pagan symbols carved in stone, nothing more than a brief encounter. And yet, she had left everything to him. The house stood alone at the village's edge, encased in ivy and sorrow. A Victorian manor with rotting window frames, thick fog pressing against the glass, and a chill that didn't leave even in daylight. When Edric stepped inside, it felt less like entering a home and more like stepping into the pages of a book he hadn't agreed to read. The air was musty, and the wood beneath his feet creaked as though it resented his presence. Something in that place felt old, not in the way buildings are old, but in the way graves are. Edric thought he was there to claim property. He didn't know that the house had claimed him instead. While exploring the house, Edric found it filled with oddities. Antique books written in forgotten dialects, paintings of unnatural scenes with hidden figures in the shadows, and small wooden idols with faces twisted in agony. But in a hidden compartment behind an old armoire, he found the most peculiar thing of all, a black, spherical stone the size of a clenched fist. It was polished smooth, like obsidian, but darker, almost liquid in appearance. It pulsed faintly, as if breathing. It felt cold to the touch, yet somehow alive. When Edric picked it up, a low vibration traveled through his hand and up his arm, whispering something wordless into his bones. He couldn't explain why, but he couldn't look away from it. He placed it beside his bed, assuming it was just an artifact, a strange relic, valuable perhaps, but harmless. That night, Edric dreamed of a place he'd never seen. A narrow stone bridge draped in fog, and a boy standing at its edge. He watched helplessly as the bridge cracked beneath the boy's feet and collapsed into the ravine below. The boy vanished into darkness. Edric awoke drenched in cold sweat. It was 3:33 a.m. The obsidian stone rested on his nightstand, facing him as if it had turned on its own. The following morning, Edric's hands trembled as he read the local newspaper. Tucked in the corner of the page was a brief obituary. A teenage boy from Black Hollow had died in the early hours, falling from the old stone bridge that connected the village to the nearby woods. It was the boy from Edric's dream. The exact time. The same location. Panic clawed at Edric's thoughts. He wasn't superstitious. He didn't believe in omens. But what he saw had happened. Not metaphorically, exactly. Down to the final, chilling detail. It couldn't be a coincidence. Somehow, he had known it would happen, though he'd never seen that bridge before or met that boy. And he knew, deep down, that the obsidian stone was the reason. Later that day, Edric noticed something new. When he held the stone, flashes of unfamiliar faces flickered behind his eyes, brief, flickering images like silent film reels stitched together by madness. Sometimes places. Sometimes people. Always something bad. He tried to convince himself it was stress, or grief, or just his imagination feeding on fear. But that night, another vision came. And it, too, became real. Edric could no longer deny it, he was seeing the future. Not a hopeful one. Not one filled with light. Every glimpse showed accidents, disappearances, tragedies. Sometimes days in advance. Sometimes only hours. The more he used the stone, the clearer the visions became. But with that clarity came torment. He began to dread sleep, fear his own mind. There was no pattern. No logic. Only loss. He tried warning people. Once, he anonymously alerted the police about a collapsed roof at a nearby mill. They brushed it off. 3 days later, 2 workers were crushed. He watched the news that evening with shaking hands and the stone glowing faintly beside him, like a predator satisfied with its hunt. Each time he touched it, he felt less human. He stopped leaving the house. Time blurred. Daylight seemed thinner. He became a witness to fate, powerless to alter it. People he saw in his visions began appearing around town. He recognized their faces days before they died. It was then he realized this wasn't a gift. It was a curse. The stone didn't just show him the future, it made him part of it. And he could feel it pulling him deeper. Not just to see death, but to become part of whatever force was delivering it. As Edric's grip on reality slipped, something strange began happening around the house. It started with mirrors. Every time he passed one, he noticed names etched faintly into the glass, as if traced by a fingertip from the inside. At first, the foggy bathroom mirror simply read Michael Thorpe. The next day, the village news reported a fatal fire in a shed outside town. Michael Thorpe was the only victim. Then came Lillian Barrett. A woman Edric had never met, yet hours later, her name appeared in the obituary column, dead from drowning in her own bathtub. He tried scrubbing the mirrors, covering them, even smashing one with a hammer. But the names kept returning, always in that same trembling script. Always followed by tragedy. It was no longer just the obsidian stone. The house itself was changing, responding to him. Feeding off him. His presence seemed to activate it. There were whispers now. Just beyond the edge of hearing. Sometimes at night, sometimes from inside the walls. Names he hadn't read yet, names he dreaded knowing. And each time he tried to stop looking, the house found another way to show him. He started taping newspapers over every mirror. But on the third night, he awoke to find them torn down, and the next name already written. This time, it was his own. In desperation, Edric searched for anything Agatha Langford might have left behind. He hadn't known her, but the obsession with his visions was beginning to unravel him. If she had suffered the same curse, she might have left clues. In the attic, buried under layers of moth-eaten blankets, he found a locked chest carved with pagan runes. Inside it lay an old leather-bound journal, brittle with age but intact. Agatha had filled its pages with cryptic entries, symbols, dates, and references to the Eye, which Edric recognized as the obsidian stone. She wrote of her own visions, a baby who would never draw breath, a bride whose heart stopped before reaching the altar, a man struck by lightning on a cloudless day. Every prediction had come true. Like Edric, she tried to intervene, and like him, she failed. What chilled him most were the final entries. Agatha warned that the eye was not simply a tool, it was a sentient watcher. It fed on foresight and despair. Those who resisted it vanished, either into madness or into some place she only called the Echo. She described it as a mirror realm, a twisted version of Black Hollow, where the dead watched and waited for the living to join them. Agatha's last written words were smeared in a frantic scrawl, "If you see your own death, it has already begun." Edric realized he had inherited more than her home. He had inherited her curse. And possibly, her end. The next few days blurred into one long nightmare. Edric stopped sleeping entirely. He could no longer trust what was real. Visions bled into waking life. He saw shadows move across the hall when no one was there. Sometimes, the sound of his own voice echoed from another room, repeating things he hadn't said yet. The mirrors, long since removed, began appearing again, fragments embedded in walls, puddles, even his own reflection in glass surfaces. The worst came when he saw a vision of a school bus skidding off a bridge just outside the village. 20 children. Screaming. Water filling the broken windows. He tried to intervene. Drove to the road. Warned everyone. Even stood in the middle of the street screaming until someone called the police. The next day, there was no bus crash. No accident. Nothing in the news. It hadn't happened. Yet. That night, he saw the same vision, only this time, one of the children looked directly at him, lips moving in perfect silence. "You made it real." The next morning, the crash happened exactly as he saw it. His warning hadn't stopped fate, it had somehow confirmed it. By trying to prevent it, he became its witness. Its agent. Each attempt to escape the cycle made it stronger. And Edric understood, the more he tried to change the future, the more the eye anchored it in place. Black Hollow began to change with him. Locals grew colder. Faces he had never seen before stared at him with too much familiarity. It was as though the entire village existed only to play a part in his torment. He saw the same woman at the market every day, though no one else acknowledged her. A child drew a picture of Edric falling into a hole surrounded by black fog, and handed it to him without a word. On the 5th day, an elderly man appeared at Edric's gate. He never spoke. Just stood for hours, eyes locked on the upstairs window. When Edric finally built up the courage to confront him, the man had vanished, but muddy footprints led from the garden all the way into the attic, where they abruptly stopped. Edric realized Black Hollow wasn't just cursed, it was aware. The village itself had been feeding the eye for generations. Every death, every vision, every failed attempt to prevent fate, all part of a ritual older than memory. Edric hadn't been chosen by chance. He had been drawn here. Perhaps even bred for it. In one final moment of clarity, he decided to end it. Destroy the eye. Burn the house. Walk away. But by then, it was already too late. The night he chose to destroy the eye, the storm came. Rain that sounded like whispers. Thunder that shook more than just the windows. He threw the obsidian stone into the fireplace, expecting flames. Instead, the fire died instantly. Cold filled the room, and the shadows grew teeth. Behind him, every mirror he had removed had reappeared, now filled with faces. Not his own. Not Agatha's. But the faces of every person he had seen die. Staring. Smiling. Reaching. The largest mirror cracked slowly, and from it, his own reflection stepped out, not as he was, but as he would be, pale, empty-eyed, mouth sewn shut. The eye rolled out of the ashes, unharmed. And Edric knew the truth. You could not destroy fate. Not when fate had been watching you since the beginning. His final vision was of himself, trapped behind the mirror, screaming without sound, while the reflection walked calmly into the village, assuming his life. The door to the house never opened again. But from time to time, when someone new arrives in Black Hollow, they receive a letter. An inheritance from someone they never knew. Always with the same warning carved faintly into the seal. The eye is never blind. After the mirror incident, time no longer moved linearly for Edric. He would wake up to a tomorrow that had already ended or find himself reliving hours that should have passed. The clocks inside the Langford house spun violently or stood still, and outside, the sky remained dim no matter the hour. He couldn't tell if days or weeks had passed. In one moment, he watched a future version of himself hanging lifeless from the attic beam. In the next, he saw himself burying something, or someone, in the garden, tears carving lines through mud-caked skin. The line between vision and reality was gone. And so was his sense of self. Sometimes, he glimpsed another version of himself, worn, bloodied, whispering to the shadows that watched him from the corners. He was becoming unmoored, spiraling into the same madness Agatha had warned about. But unlike her, he couldn't write warnings for someone else. No one would come next. Because he was beginning to suspect, he was the last. The deeper Edric searched, the clearer the eye's origins became. Hidden within Agatha's journal was a torn letter, dated over 150 years ago, signed only with the initials CL. The letter spoke of an ancient cult known as the Watchers of the Turning Glass, guardians of a relic that could reflect not only the future, but what should have never been. According to the letter, the eye had been buried beneath Black Hollow long before the village existed. Agatha had unearthed it by accident, believing she could use its visions to save lives. But each attempt to alter fate merely trapped more souls in the Theko, a mirror dimension tied to the eye's power. The eye, the letter said, did not show the future. It created it, feeding off obsession, fear, and despair. Edric realized his visions were not glimpses of what would happen. They were traps, forged the moment he tried to stop them. The eye needed a vessel, a mind pliable enough to twist with every failed attempt at salvation. He hadn't been cursed by chance. He had been chosen. Edric tried one final act of defiance. He began documenting everything. Not in hopes of being saved, but in hopes that someone might one day find the truth. He wrote down names, visions, warnings, and details of how the eye manipulated its hosts. He hid the journal beneath the floorboards of the study, beneath loose planks marked with ash. Then, for the first time in weeks, he sat still. Waiting. The next morning, the villagers claimed the Langford house had gone silent. No lights, no movement. When the police arrived, they found the house empty. Not a single trace of Edric remained, no footprints, no fingerprints, no scent. Just mirrors. Dozens of them. Each room lined with identical frames. And in every reflection, Edric. Trapped. Staring. Mouth open in an eternal scream that could never be heard. 6 months later, an American historian named Dr. Evelyn Crow received a letter from a solicitor in Cornwall. An unexpected inheritance. A house. A quaint, forgotten village. A name she didn't recognize, Edric Langford. Curiosity piqued, Evelyn made the journey to Black Hollow, drawn by her passion for ancient relics and untouched history. When she arrived, the villagers greeted her with silent stares and forced smiles. They said little, only warning her not to stay long. But the house was waiting. Inside, she found an obsidian stone hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the study. Next to it, a journal, weathered, nearly crumbling, filled with desperate warnings written in a hand not her own. And when she passed the hallway mirror on her way upstairs, a name had already appeared in the glass. Evelyn Crow. No matter who holds it, no matter how many try to fight it, the eye remains. Ageless. Silent. Ever watching. It passes from hand to hand, century after century, always under the illusion of chance. Always dressed in tragedy. Evelyn would not be the last. Somewhere, the eye was already waiting for its next host. Perhaps you've seen it too, faintly, in the reflection of your screen. That shimmer in the corner of your eye that disappears when you turn. That dream that shows you tomorrow before it comes. Maybe, like Edric. Like Agatha. Like Evelyn. You're not seeing the future. You're being shown. And the eye? The eye never forgets a face once it has looked into your soul. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.